Mike Tomlin cannot be nailed down on what the Steelers will do whenever Russell Wilson is 100% healthy. I want to talk about how he continues to handle that question in press conferences and how it will relate to the eventual decision when the Steelers get there about Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. We do that, talk about Steelers injuries and where the Steelers are in the AFC North that hasn't started off too well outside of them. We do that with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Only on Game Time. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Mike DeFabo from The Athletic. He covers the Steelers there. Mike, it's always great to get into it with you.
Chris, let's get into it. I don't know. I sent you a text message. I know you were asking people for punishments if your prediction of the Steelers losing went wrong, and my brother had one. He said, like Anchorman, you should have to say, let's get into it with a question mark at the end of it all week. You obviously didn't take that, Chris, but know that you're still well listened to within the DeFabo household.
Well, thank you for that. Lots of fans were cheering on me having to wear a paper bag over my head as I did the intro on Monday. So that'll be a thing if I continue to pick against the Steelers and be wrong this year, which might happen. Who knows? But Mike, let's get into the big topic of the day. And I continue to look at how Mike Tomlin is being carefully wordy about this Russell Wilson, Justin Fields situation. And it's not new. He did the same thing last week and the week before. If you ever ask him, okay, but what if Russell Wilson gets 100% healthy? Is he still QB1? Because that's what he's listed at on the depth chart. And he's like, guys, I'm not taking hypotheticals. You can't pin me down. And Mike, I feel like you think of the Steelers, you think of angry runs because Najee Harris can't get brought down. You think of how George Pickens in open space can't be brought down. We can't bring Mike Tomlin down in a press conference for just giving us an answer here. He's unstoppable. What do you make of how he has handled this and why he's been so careful?
Well, first of all, I think he's playing this right because if I were in his shoes, you have no incentive right now to come out and name Justin Fields the starting quarterback. Like, what happens if he goes out in Indianapolis this week? Not saying he's going to, and just has a horrible performance, turning the ball over, throwing inaccurate passes. The Steelers get upset by a team that they very much should beat. Then where does that leave him? So if I were him, the last thing I'm going to do is paint myself into a corner. And right now, when Russell Wilson is not available to you, make some kind of bold declaration. So I understand absolutely why he's taking this approach. But I'll say this. He could also say, Russell Wilson is QB1 on the depth chart. He's QB1 when healthy. That will not change. But that's not what he's saying. And what that tells me, the Steelers are absolutely open to Justin Fields coming in here and changing their mind about who should be their starting quarterback going forward. And I feel like through the first 2 weeks, he did what they asked him to do, which was don't lose the game. But it was in this third week when the Chargers were playing a too high safety look for much of the game. They were eliminating the deep ball. They're a stingy defense that was stopping the run. You needed Justin Fields to complete passes over the middle of the field between those two safeties. You needed him to be efficient on underneath routes. He did both of those things. And what I felt was a quarterback competition that nobody won, and Russell Wilson basically had the position by default. This was the closest I came to a quarterback actually stepping up and saying, I'm the guy. This is my job going forward.
I agree with you. The bottom line here is the reason Mike Tomlin won't let anyone pin him down is because he realized, why would I let anyone pin me down into a decision right now? And we all know, it's no secret, it would be more beneficial to the Steelers if Justin Fields turned out to be the guy. Because if he's the guy, he's 25 years old, you lock him into a future contract, you may have your franchise quarterback for the next 10 years. And now that question's out the door. You don't got to worry about it. If Russell Wilson's the guy, that could work out for this year, maybe next year. But you'll have to quickly be searching for your next quarterback again. So obviously the Steelers, like ideally, Justin Fields would work out. But when you're in this position, if you're Mike Tomlin, you just saw Kenny Pickett's situation blow up last year when Mason Rudolph was the starter, and then Kenny Pickett wasn't sure about things, and then Kenny Pickett didn't want to be in Pittsburgh when Russell Wilson was signed. They want to avoid all that. You're like, you know what? We're not talking about that. And that's why he's clearing the air, not talking hypotheticals. Right now, Justin Fields is setting to start this week. If Russell Wilson's healthy, we'll reapproach it here. I want y'all so that y'all see the full picture. I'm going to play Mike Tomlin talking about the situation, and then each time we asked him on Tuesday about this to show you how careful he's being, but also it's not like he's hiding it. He's being very assertive. I am not telling you for a reason. And I think there's a good point to that. Here's Mike Tomlin from Tuesday's press conference.
Still very much in the same place with Russ this week as we were last week, at least at the beginning of the week. I just met with him and our head athletic trainer and talked about what tomorrow looks like. Tomorrow is a limited participation day from a scheduling perspective. He had a good workout today. We'll see how he feels in the morning, but I'm not expecting him to be a full participant tomorrow. And so as we walk in the building tomorrow, I want Justin singularly focused on starting for us and doing what's required to be ready to do that. And so although I'm sure you got questions, I probably got similar answers that I had a week ago, and we'll see where the week leads us. If his availability or the quality of his practice participation picks up, maybe we'll consider that later in the week. If it doesn't, then it won't be a consideration, and we'll just continue with where we are right now. And so that's just the status of not only him, but our intentions regarding Justin as I stand here today in preparation for this game. Again, as I mentioned, very similar to last week, very similar to the week before.
Mike, now that you're 3 games in, what more do you need to see from Justin? Why not name him the starting quarterback going forward?
Because there's no need. I explained to you the variables of the week. It has not changed. He's going to walk in this building with that mindset tomorrow. And so I really, there's no need to. Sometimes in this business, man, there's a myriad of complex decisions that need to be made. I've learned to make them when it's appropriate, and it's not necessary as we sit here right now. When Russ gets to an appropriate point of health and we have a decision to make, I'll make it and I'll announce it and I'll be really transparent about it. But until then, I don't care how many ways you guys ask me. I got no intentions of making a decision that's unnecessary at this juncture.
Mike, related to that, what is that appropriate point of health or healthy that Russell has to hit for you to make that decision?
We'll know when we get there. He'll not only be healthy in terms of keeping himself safe, but he'll be healthy in terms of being able to be productive and do the things that he needs to do and we need him to do.
Has Justin Fields shown you some things that changed that point for you? If he had struggled compared to playing pretty well.
No question Justin has played well, and that's exciting for him and for us. But I'm not surprised by that, and I hadn't looked at it in terms of the decision-making because it's not time yet.
Mike, what is it that you like most about him that you've seen? Justin.
As I mentioned in here repeatedly, I like his steady demeanor. I like that in a leader. He doesn't ride the emotional roller coaster when things are going good, when things are going bad. Guys can rally around that. He's steady. He's a competitor, man. He likes to compete. He doesn't turn down things. He's aggressive in play, scrambling and so forth. It's just been fun to get to know him, and not only know him as a guy, but know him as a competitor.
So, Mike, a lot of different things said by Mike Tomlin there. But again, to our point that I think we both agree upon, it behooves Mike Tomlin to not lay out a situation because, like you said, if he names Justin Fields as a starter and it goes bad, that's bad. But let's say he says, let's say he comes out and says, no, Russell Wilson is the guy, and Justin Fields lights it up, and they're more inclined to say, you know what, things have changed. Then you've made more false promises to Russell Wilson about how safe and secure his job is. It's a delicate tightrope that Mike Tomlin is walking, but I think he's happy to walk it as long as they keep winning games right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm interested to see what Justin Fields does this week because I have seen growth from him. That last game, I was impressed with his ability to distribute the football, his ability to attack the middle of the field. So, now going into this week, I feel like this is almost one of the most important games of his career in terms of determining, is he going to be the Steelers starter going forward? Because it seems like, based on the previous timeline, maybe week 5, maybe week 6, we could see a healthy Russell Wilson. And that will be the time that we'll have to ultimately see what Mike Tomlin says. And that's when Mike Tomlin will have to make this decision that he's been talking about.
Agreed. Still a long way to go there. But as it stands right now, Mike Tomlin does say that Russell Wilson will have a chance to practice this week. He's not set to be a full participant today. That is Wednesday. But we will keep all eyes on this as the week continues. But there's other injuries that are piling up for the Steelers, and I do think those are important to talk about. We'll address those and the state of the AFC North next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Mike DeFabo, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, to remind you, this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. And at FanDuel, you can make all the different bets that you want to make all across sports, NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, all those things, and especially on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Here's this week's look at the money at the lines here for Steelers at Colts. The Steelers are road favorites for the first time this year. Actually, no, excuse me. They were favorites against the Broncos. I take that back. But they're 1.5-point favorites in Indianapolis. The money line right now is -134 Steelers, +114 Colts. The over-under set at 39.5 points. All the odd ends and lines you want for this week and throughout the season can be found at FanDuel.com or on the FanDuel app, which you can download right to your phone today. But also, FanDuel's offering a huge chance for everyone right now to take advantage if you're a new customer. If you're new to FanDuel, just sign up for FanDuel today. Go to FanDuel.com, and when you make your first $5 bet, you will get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in free bets today to new customers when they just bet $5 only on FanDuel.com. Download FanDuel today or go to their website, FanDuel.com, to download America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, let's talk about the Steelers injury situation because it is starting to grow some concerns in some areas. I think especially on defense with you see how things have played out. Mike Tomlin saying this week that Michael Pruitt, Cory Trice, and Alex Highsmith are all out this week already determined. That is Cory Trice with a hamstring he injured during the game, Alex Highsmith with a groin. Now, I do think it's a good sign that these guys aren't on injured reserve unless they are on injured reserve.
Trice just got placed on injured reserve. Breaking news in the Locked On Steelers podcast.
There you go. Right there. So this is what I get for setting up shows and putting clips together. I miss things like that. So Trice being on IR, that's a very bad sign with his history. Alex Highsmith not being on IR, that is a great sign for him. But Mike, this is a tough situation for the defense that I think that everyone's like, oh, well, guess what? Nick Herbig gets to play. That's awesome. But the strength of the edge rusher position was its depth. And now you're probably asking DeMarvin Leal to step there. Before we get to corner, talk about the situation at outside linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, when the Steelers drafted Nick Herbig, there were questions about him for a number of reasons. First of all, people were like, man, is this guy too small at 6'2" and 240 to play edge rusher? He's proven that that's the case. But also people were like, man, is this a luxury pick? This is a team that has TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. When is this guy ever going to get on the football field? And now you're seeing the approach that Omar Khan and assistant general manager Andy Weidel took paying dividends, where you have an injury to a key position group. And we've seen what happens to the Steelers defense when the pass rush disappears. You know, when TJ Watt has been injured, this defense looks like a shell of itself. It's a completely different defense. So by having a quality contributor like that, Nick Herbig, ready to come in off the bench, I think that the Steelers, their pass rush, as long as he can stay healthy, should be pretty solid. But, you know, earlier this year, Marcus Golden retired. And, you know, right now, DeMarvin Leal has the positional flexibility, but he has not yet proven himself to be a solid edge rusher in true regular season NFL games. So that position group, you know, they're one snap away from you saying, man, what was such a great defense is now missing its most important piece, which is the pressure.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is that they got Nick Herbig. I think everyone's excited to see him play more snaps and get that, but now not having him be your starter and not being sure about the guy behind him, that was one of the strengths I thought the Steelers could say they had going all year, is that, you look at how TJ Watt's playing late in these games. He's not tired. And granted, some of that is the Steelers offense possessing the football actually this year. But I think some of it's also they've been able to pull him during games and not feel like they're missing everything in the world. Whereas, they still see him as the best defensive player in football, but you have comparable backups, whereas before you had to go and sign random guys off like practice squads to fill in at outside linebacker. So something to watch there. But let's talk cornerback here, Mike, because Cory Trice going to injury reserve is a big deal, because he had been a really good backup option off the bench to come in and fill in for Dante Jackson, who has had multiple injury concerns already this season. Are the Steelers in dire straits here at cornerback, or are we overstating the injury situation here?
Well, I mean, if I had looked at the Steelers roster, cornerback was one of the positions I felt was thinnest coming into the regular season. Behind Joey Porter Jr. and Dante Jackson, their next option is Cory Trice. He's the primary backup to both of those guys on the outside. And I think that fans reasonably were very excited about Trice in some of his upside because of his measurables, his length, and, his ability to run. So, losing a guy like that, they would be down to their options would be Darius Rush, who's a developmental piece. He played receiver most of his life, and there are still times where he looks like a wide receiver playing defensive back. And then James Pierre would be the next man up, who they just promoted or signed to their active roster. He was a journeyman who wasn't on a team for a reason to start the season. So, the Steelers have done a really good job on cutting down on explosive passing plays. When I talked to Terrell Austin, the defensive coordinator last year, late in the season, he said, we feel like that's the one thing that's keeping us from being a shutdown defense. They've largely rectified that by the nature of playing Minkah Fitzpatrick more in the middle field, and also because of the fact of Dante Jackson's been an upgrade. So, you do wonder where they go from here and what the status could be if they lose another cornerback, because that is becoming a very thin position group.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing I think that has made this defense really sharp to start off the season is that they've had answers at every level of the defense: inside linebacker, outside linebacker, D-line, corner, safety. If corner takes a hit, that then becomes a weakness that they're going to have to start covering up, and they're going to have to find ways to compensate for that. So it's something there to watch, certainly.
Another quick point, Chris, is just also Trice was also a contributor in their starting dime defense. Mm-hmm. So they'll have to either evolve that package. Maybe we see more of the 3 safety look, which is how the Steelers deployed their dime package last year with Minkah, Elliott, and KZ all on the field together. Maybe Pierre factors into the dime conversation, or maybe the Steelers choose to play more nickel, which is something that adding some of those rangy inside linebackers like Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen afforded them the opportunity to do. Maybe now this is another incentive to play more of that nickel package.
I agree. I agree with that assessment there. Let's talk about guys who might be coming back soon. Isaac Seumalo is in the category of we will let the participation be our guide. I feel like that I need a banner that says that moving forward. But Isaac Seumalo, he's been getting better and better. It was a good thing he didn't go on official IR and everything. But do you get a sense that he is sooner rather than later, or is this just kind of the whole we'll leave the light on and we're going to be saying this for another month or so?
Yeah, I think it's probably optimistic to think he's going to play this week. I think if I were to handicap it, I would say it's a 50-50 shot right now. To this point, he's mostly been working individually off to the side. He is a very veteran guy that once that pec injury recovers, you should have confidence that he could step right into a starting role. He's been one of the guys that typically the Steelers, when they give veterans day off, he always gets his day off for a reason. He doesn't really need all those practice reps. But still, coming back from an injury like that, that's going to affect your push, your punch, your ability to move people in the trenches. So, I would tend to believe that they might want to give him a full week of regular reps to get up to speed. We'll see if he gets those this week or if that comes next week.
Yeah, certainly there. One more player to talk about who maybe can come back. Maybe he could have came back already. That's Roman Wilson, guy that we kind of can't forget about in the shuffle here. 3rd-round draft pick, rookie wide receiver at a position that they could use help at. They could use more production out of their wide receivers. Mike, it appeared like he was a healthy scratch this past weekend. Granted, again, a third-round rookie who missed pretty much all of camp because of an injury. So I get reasons there. But, Mike Tomlin asked about, one of his Tomlins, it's tough to get on a moving train, as the often says. Where do you see Roman Wilson as far as getting on that train? Is he running for it right now? Is he hanging on by a thread, or is he going to be left at the station?
I think he'll get up to speed eventually. I was surprised that he was a healthy scratch this week. I expected him to play his first game this last week, week 3. I think there's a couple factors there. First, it's his youth and inexperience, and he has lost a ton of time, all of training camp virtually, and now the first 3 weeks of the regular season, he's been limited or a partial participant for much of that. So, that's definitely a factor. The other factor is he's been kind of re-aggravating this injury, even in small ways. You could tell from the participation report, there's times where he goes limited or full, and then the next day he's did not participate or limited. So that indicates what we're seeing on the field, that, there are some little tweaks and he's still kind of dealing with that. But, when Roman Wilson comes back, he's going to be a very important piece. We've talked a lot about how the Steelers haven't targeted the middle of the field very much other than this most recent week. Well, that's basically Roman Wilson's game. I mean, I don't have the stats in front of me, but it's something like 80% of the passes he caught at Michigan last year were between the numbers. So, I think stylistically, he provides the perfect complement to a deep ball guy like George Pickens. It's just a matter of, can you get him up to speed and how quickly can that happen? But, I think once he does assimilate and does get his feet under him, I think he will become an important piece of this passing game.
I think he should become. I think they kind of need him to become one because if they can get another serious weapon on the field for Justin Fields or someday Russell Wilson to target, it will diversify how this offense looks. It'll take pressure off of George Pickens. Not that he doesn't welcome the pressure, because I think that's something I think he's actually handled that well so far. But again, it just helps having multiple playmakers or more playmakers at the wide receiver position for the Steelers moving forward. When we come back, I want to talk about the state of the AFC North, because through week 3, the Steelers are still in first place and by multiple games. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Mike DeFabo, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you this show is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. What's something that you'd love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you like, or was that lost in your childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes responsibilities get in the way. Whether you want to get into gardening, a new language, or even get better at something you already know how to do, it's important to tap into that curiosity for you to grow. That's where therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back-to-school era can come at any age. Therapy has helped me understand how making sure I'm always learning things helps my mind stay fresh and ready to tackle life's everyday problems by being ready on all angles. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp knows that life can be busy and stressful, which is why it's designed to be suitable for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, your host, here with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, let's talk about this AFC North situation. 2 nights ago, because this is the Wednesday episode. 2 nights ago on Monday Night Football, the Cincinnati Bengals at home got embarrassed by the Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels threw all over them. He threw his first touchdown as an NFL quarterback, and his first touchdown also went to a lineman.
Trent Scott. It was probably Jaden Daniels' first ever touchdown pass in the NFL, and probably Trent Scott's first and last touchdown reception in the NFL.
Insane things that have happened there. But I'm going to look at this division, because that was the end of the week there. And through 3 weeks, the Steelers sit on top of the AFC North. They are 3-0. The Ravens and Browns are tied at 1-2, and the Bengals are 0-3. I look at this and I ask you, Mike, a big part of what has made the Steelers' schedule the toughest in the NFL this year is because the end of the year, they're going to go through that gauntlet of the AFC North. No matter what happens, you got those 6 games against the teams that you know and they know you, and this is a tough division. Is this a sign that maybe the division isn't as tough as we expected it to be, or do you think these records will correct themselves out as the season rolls along?
I think the division isn't quite as tough as we expected it to be. I'll focus on the Bengals specifically here for a second. Like, in my mind, I was looking at them saying, if Joe Burrow is back and healthy, he is an elite level quarterback, and automatically he makes the Bengals a contender. And I expected them to be a playoff team and maybe even contend for more. But I forgot that they had one of the worst defenses in the league, and that defense didn't get any better. And Joe Burrow, unless they make him play both ways and put him at safety, I think that the Bengals are going to continue to have their problems, and that, not only do they need Joe Burrow to be back, they're going to need him to light up the scoreboard to help produce some points to support that struggling defense. So, they've been underwhelming. I look at the Ravens. The Ravens, I think, have the best chance to recover. They lost both their offensive and defensive coordinators this offseason, and I feel like they're going through some growing pains as a result. That's a difficult process, especially with the unique quarterback like Lamar Jackson. I think that they're going to put it together and that they're going to be a team that makes the playoffs and factors into this conversation by the end of the season and play some competitive games against the Steelers. And then the Browns, I think that they might, I would use words that you probably can't say on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Describe the state of that team. I feel like they are in disarray and circling the drain right now. But, things can change in a long season.
Things can change, and it is a long season. It's a week-to-week league. 1 week you're down in the dumps. I mean, look at last year. The Steelers lost 3 terrible games in a row and then lifted themselves up and put themselves back in the playoffs last year. So it is very possible that things can be turning around. But if you're the Steelers, you have to be feeling good about your position right now. And you can't be sitting there saying, oh, well, this division's a lock. This is easy. But you, like for example, they're 3 games up on the Bengals through 3 weeks. And, I would have called myself crazy for saying this even 2 weeks ago, but I'm not that certain that they're going to beat the Panthers this upcoming week with Andy Dalton's revenge game lining up right there. I think that there's some interesting things brewing there. I'm with you. I think the Ravens, they're a team I had pegged all along this year. They're going to bounce back. They're going to be one of the better teams in the NFL. That's going to be tough. But the 2 Ohio teams, they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're getting destroyed out there in Ohio. And I just think that that's where the Steelers, if they get to the second half of the season, and again, you look at the Steelers' schedule, the one thing that was favorable about it was that the Steelers didn't have to play a whole bunch of elite teams on the front half of it, and they're already 3-0 to start. They're facing a Colts team that they're favored against. The Cowboys game could be very interesting depending on which Cowboys team they get. The Raiders don't look too crazy. The Jets don't look too crazy. The Giants, even though they just beat the Browns, they don't look too crazy. And then you get the Commanders, who, again, you go through that. If they win, if they go out, so what they have, six games left before they start the AFC North season. If they win 4 out of those 6 of games that I think that they could be favored in or have a good fighting chance in there, they're 7-2 going into the second half of the season against an AFC North that is underperforming. I just have to think that if the Steelers can keep themselves together, not have big injuries, this could have a really good situation to set them up for a much better season than even I was predicting.
Yeah, I agree with you. In a lot of ways, they're doing what they needed to, which was win these early winnable type games against lesser opponents. And even some of the opponents, like the Falcons win, that's looking much better after their win in week 2. And then the way that they stood toe-to-toe with the Kansas City Chiefs. Denver bounced back. They don't look so horrible. The Chargers were 2-0 when the Steelers beat them. So these are wins over teams that I think the Steelers should win, but they're looking better, these wins, as they go along. I think to bring our conversation full circle, we were talking about injuries. To me, that's one of the most significant factors because their toughest stretch, I believe they played 3 games in 10 days. In the first 2 are on the road against arguably the 2 most physical teams in the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens. And then they have a Wednesday night game against the Kansas City Chiefs and Taylor Swift playing quarterback. So, my question is, what's going to be the state of your defensive line after you've played those dominant rushing teams? Because as much as we've talked about the injuries to other position groups on defense, I look at the defensive line and I feel like they've got studs up front right now in the top 3 guys. Cam Hayward's playing to his potential, looking like pre-injury self. Larry Ogunjobi's the healthiest he's been as a Steeler, and it's showing. Benton's taking that expected step up in year 2. But behind them, I think there's a massive drop-off in the quality of play after those 3 guys. And I feel like when you're playing these physical teams in the AFC North, that would be my biggest concern. Not that they're going to beat you by the quality, but that the game of attrition starts to add up. And that's where my biggest concern would be for the Steelers on the backstretch.
And again, that's why we talked about injuries already, because of the thing, but they're also a thing that everybody goes through. And I think that that's going to be oftentimes, I think that decides games more than we want to admit late in the season. When you get down there, is who do you have available? What does it make available? So a big thing for the Steelers as they continue to get W's, but stay healthy. If they're able to do those 2 things, they could set themselves up for a rather impressive second half season run and maybe even a full season record. Mike, give us where you predicted the Steelers to be at the start of the season, and has that changed based off of how they've played and what you've seen out of the AFC North?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have predicted the Steelers to go maybe 3-1 or 2-2 over the first 4 games. They're better than I expected in the win column, but I think that the brand of football that they're playing is exactly what I anticipated. This is still very much a team that's going to rely on great defense, maybe even historically great defense, an effective running game, and then the quarterback doing just enough to put them over the top. So,
right.
I think that they're playing to their identity, and they're doing a good job of managing these games. Now, for me, the biggest question is like, which quarterback is going to step up and say, this is my job. I'm the starting quarterback, and how much can he elevate this offense to turn the Steelers from what I think is going to be a playoff team into a team that can really contend and stand toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and with Josh Allen and with some of these better teams that we've seen in the AFC.
And I think that question will hang over the Steelers' heads until they beat one of those types of teams. Because even if they sweep the AFC North, I think everyone's going to be like, well, okay, the AFC North wasn't all that this year. Plus, the Steelers typically do well in the division. It's going to be about, can they beat those top AFC teams, and where will they position themselves in the playoffs? Because also, can they get a home playoff game with a favorable a matchup? That hasn't happened for a little bit now. We'll talk about that as the week goes on. He's Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. Mike, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, definitely. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike DeFabo and check out all my work on The Athletic.
Absolutely. He's Mike DeFabo. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.